What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound brought to you by the Hockey News. I'm your host, Emma Lingan. I am joined today by Michael Augello and Jim Parsons of the Hockey News, coming at you as we do every Tuesday and Thursday to talk about the latest and greatest from around the NHL in bite-sized portions. But before we get into all of that today, do want to remind you that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. All right, Mike, we got to start with your Buffalo Sabres. They picked up their 50th win of the season on Monday to secure the top spot in the Atlantic Division. Tage Thompson scored twice in their 5-1 win over the Blackhawks. He reached 40 goals this year now to help Buffalo earn its first division title since the 2009-2010 season. So it's just the third time in franchise history they've reached 50 wins as well. It's the first time they've done it since 2007. You're in there right in the middle of it, Mike. How do you make sense of what's been just an absolutely insane year for the Sabres? And what's one strength and one weakness that you think they have going for them in the playoffs?
I can't make sense of it. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, this team was last in the Eastern Conference on December the 9th, and since have had the best record in the NHL. And nobody can really explain it. Now, we're all watching it. We're all just, looking at it and saying, how is this happening? I mean, I've talked to people in the press box and like, what happened? Did they just flick a switch? Well, I've said for a while, are they this good or are they just hot? And it's been over a half a season. So people say, well, they can't just be hot. Well, maybe they can. I mean, St. Louis was hot in the second half of 2019, but they went on to win a Stanley Cup. In terms of strength and weakness, I think their scoring and their team speed is one thing that sets them apart. I think they're a plus team offensively, and their speed with even guys deeper in their lineup like Zach Benson. It really puts their opposition on their heels. Their weakness, I would say the goaltending, not because Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen hasn't played well down the stretch, but he's never played in the playoffs, and Alex Lyon is injured and probably won't be available for the beginning of the series, whether they play Boston or Ottawa. So everything is on Luukkonen, and at times during his career, he's really been impressive, but then there have been times where he lets in the bad goal, and in the playoffs, you really can't do that. So I think that goaltending is going to be a big determining factor in whether they go deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, Jim, I mean, it's really kind of remarkable what the Sabres have been able to do, at least through the second half of the year. And when you look at them now, obviously, as not only a playoff team, but a division winner, I mean, what are the kind of strengths and weaknesses that you see with this team?
Well, you know what? That run is probably both their strength and potentially their weakness when it comes to the playoffs. Because when you look at a team like that getting that hot, I'm sort of reminded it's different, but it's kind of the same with the Boston Bruins when they won the President's Trophy and got that hot that season and then went in and laid a dud in the first round and were eliminated. The Buffalo Sabres could do one of two things here as they get into the playoffs. One, they could continue on this really solid run and go quite deep, or this could be overwhelming. This could be one of those things where they had such a good season and just exploded to the point where they're now leading in the Atlantic and have won the division. That could be the thing that maybe works against them. It's kind of one of those, you never know what's going to happen here. And they haven't been in the playoffs for so long. It's really hard to tell how they're going to react to this in the way that they came back this season. Will they go in really confident, overconfident? It's hard to say. As far as their strengths and weaknesses go, I mean, Rasmus Dahlin is the leader of this team. He's going to be the guy that leads them through all this. I think they're a solid team. I think they've been a solid team for a little while. It's just a matter of whether or not they can keep this run going, put it together, or if it just sort of comes to a head at some point and the hottest team going in is not the hottest team when the playoffs begin.
Emma, one veteran reporter who I talked to in the press box, he said the real proving ground here is whether, after losing 3 or 4 games during the regular season, they bounce back. And really, since December the 9th, they haven't had that. They've been consistent. They lost, I think, 2 games in regulation in a row, and then they responded quickly. We know everything is focused completely in the playoffs. If they lose 1 game in the playoffs, in a emotional or just something happens. I want to see how this team responds. They're young, and as Jim just said, they haven't been tested in the playoffs. This will be the test. And Lindy Ruff is a veteran coach, but a lot of these guys have not played in the playoffs.
Well, the playoff picture is starting to sort of come into view here in the East, finally. We had the Philadelphia Flyers clinch last night, their first playoff berth since 2020. They won over the Carolina Hurricanes 3-2 in a shootout to clinch their spot in the postseason. They are now going to face off against their cross-state rivals, the Pittsburgh Penguins, in the first round, and they're going to be doing that for the first time since 2018. So great matchup here, I think. Mike, what do you think was the biggest reason that the Flyers were able to break their playoff drought this season? And how do you kind of see this upcoming series playing out? Because remember, this is a Penguins team that we did not expect to be in this position either.
Can we get Ilya Bryzgalov and Marc-Andre Fleury back to that 2012 series where it was completely insane? That would be great. As for the Flyers, I think actually the thing down the stretch that really put them over the top was the goaltending of Dan Vladar and Samuel Ersson. I mean, they got great goaltending. They got just enough offense. They played much better defensively under Rick Tocchet. Their power play hasn't been very good. And then they got some key players back like Forster, and then the insertion of Porter Martone late in the season really put them over the top. So they've got a lot of young players. Again, they don't have many players that are playoff tested, but they are red hot, and they're going to give Pittsburgh a run for their money. I think the veteran experience of guys like Malkin, Carlson, Crosby could put the Penguins over the top, but I'll be sitting back eating popcorn and watching this series, very, very intently.
Yeah, two very different teams here in the way that they're constructed and sort of where they are in their organizational timeline. You mentioned the Penguins with their veteran presence, and the Flyers are more, their core is a little bit of a younger group here. So Jim, when you look at this matchup, I mean, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. This is youth versus experience for me. This is a Pittsburgh Penguins team who nobody figured would be in the playoff mix, and Sidney Crosby, said, no, I'm not giving up on this season. We're going in and we're going to try to make the playoffs. And they did, to everybody's surprise. And this is an older team that is going to be led by their experienced players, Crosby, Malkin, Carlson, and all those guys are going to be the reason that they move on. Whereas in Philly, this is a team where you can't really name a major star. Matvei Michkov might be their guy, but he's underutilized by Rick Tocchet, right? This is a team effort with some young players that are leading the way here. Trevor Zegras has had a fantastic season. So if the Philadelphia Flyers win this series, it'll be because their youth has led them through it. If the Pittsburgh Penguins win this series, it'll be because the experienced guys that have been there before and done this are doing it again. I'm going with Pittsburgh on this one. I don't know if you're asking for predictions yet, but I have a feeling that this is a little bit much for the Flyers to get in there with that youth, and they're probably not going to pull it out. But I'm rooting for Pittsburgh on this one. I want to see those experienced guys do this one more time, and the feel-good idea that they're into the playoffs and did this without giving up that team. And Kyle Dubas has said, you know what, we're not calling this. We're not saying this season's over, and they managed to get in. So this is an exciting one for me. I like the rivalry here. I like the two different styles of teams and the way they're constructed. I'll go with Pittsburgh, but experience versus youth for me on this one.
Yeah, never too early for predictions. Now that we know that matchup, of course, it should be a good one. I mentioned that the Flyers clinched with their shootout win over the Hurricanes, but in that shootout loss for the Hurricanes, they still got the extra point, which helped them clinch the number 1 seed for the first time since they relocated from Hartford to Raleigh. So been quite a long time coming there. Mike, do you think the Hurricanes have an extra layer of pressure this year to come out of the East now that they don't have Florida standing in their way?
Well, yeah, I mean, Florida equals death for the Carolina Hurricanes when they play them. They're done. But you have the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I think is probably the favorite in the Eastern Conference in terms of their experience if they're healthy. If they get guys like Cirelli and Hedman and Hagel in their lineup in the playoffs, they're probably going to come out of the East. I'm not saying definitely, but I'm not making predictions. Prediction pain, like Mr. T in the Rocky movies. But I do think, the pressure is on the Hurricanes to get past and get to the Stanley Cup final. They've gotten to the conference final many times under Rod Brind'Amour. I think, again, here's the through line and all the things we're talking about. Goaltending. Is Brandon Bussey for real? And he's played great in the regular season. Are they, if he has one bad game, is Rod Brind'Amour going to go to Freddie Anderson? He always seems to go to Freddie Anderson. You've got to stick with Bussey and find out what he is. They're going to get a relatively easy first round match either against Ottawa or Boston, but then it gets tougher. And I mean, we'll see where they go, but they have an open avenue to the Eastern Conference final if they do play well.
An open avenue still, though, Jim, I think not necessarily an easy walk through the park to get to the top of the East there. But what do you expect from the Hurricanes in the playoffs? Again, now they don't have Florida in their way. And they've just, as Mike said, they keep getting right there, just on the edge. And then they end up falling out of it. So what do you expect from them this year?
Not much anything different from past years, to be totally honest. This is a team that is offensively zone driven. They play a very hard style. They play that style against every opponent that they ever come up against. The pressure for them, I don't know if it's about Florida or whatever the case is. It's whether or not this is a team, the way that it's built and the way that it plays under Brind'Amour, can go all the way. It's been shown so far that they can get quite far, but when it really comes to like the star power, the elite players, they don't necessarily match up with those other teams that have those elite top level talents. And the Hurricanes have not been able to acquire that, right? So they're going to play their style. They're going to play Brind'Amour hockey, and it's going to take them a long way. Whether or not that style throughout the entire Stanley Cup can get them to the promised land will be the thing that is the most pressure for them, because that hasn't really changed. They're still a really solid team that plays the same way all the time. It's just, is it good enough to win a Stanley Cup? And that's the real question. That's where the pressure is. I don't know if it has anything to do with who they're playing. It's just whether or not their style can win them a cup.
Yeah, just being able to kind of rewrite that narrative about them from the last few seasons here. Of course, as I mentioned, Carolina gets the 1 seed. The Flyers are in now as well. But unfortunately, as a result of the Flyers earning 2 points last night, the Columbus Blue Jackets were officially eliminated from playoff contention. So again, the last time they made the playoffs was in the 2019-2020 season. On January 1st, the Blue Jackets were 3 points behind the New York Rangers, dead last in the Eastern Conference. And since then, they've gone 23-13-3. So they really just narrowly missed a spot in the postseason here. Obviously, it came down to this final week, these final few games. So, Mike, where did the Blue Jackets go from here? I mean, we've credited Rick Bowness coming in with a lot of their turnaround in the second half, but knowing that he is sort of, a temporary, presumably a temporary fix there, what do you think they're missing really in order to truly take the next step?
Well, Columbus was in Buffalo recently. I talked to a couple of reporters, and it sounded as if Bowness may come back for next year. That they had a lot of success, and he's a really good coach. And if he signs on for a year or two, I know I think he's in his late 60s or early 70s. This is something he loves. But I mean, honestly, when you look at the Columbus Blue Jackets roster, the thing that stands out is, you've got 3 players in Charlie Coyle, Mason Marchment, and Boone Jenner, who's their captain, who are all unrestricted free agents. So the first thing is to get them re-signed. And, we in a very thin free agent pool, it's going to be tough to do that, even if they have cap space. And I have to say, if you look at how close they came, the difference between them making and missing the playoffs is the fact that Elvis Merzlikins is a terrible goaltender. Jet Greaves had a really good year. He's up. His contract is up. He's 25 years old. They're probably going to want to lock him up on a long-term deal. And his backup, Merzlikins, is making over $5 million and had a goals against of 3.4 and a save percentage under 900. The games that he lost cost them the playoffs. I would buy him out in a red hot minute.
All right, Jim, your follow-up to that.
Yeah, tell us how you really feel there, Michael. Columbus is an interesting team. They were one of the groups, I think, that got the coaching bump ahead of all these other teams that did the coaching change at the end of the season, right? They did it early, and it worked. Rick Bowness came in there, and he does what he does. When he comes in and takes over a team, they do really well under his guidance. Columbus is interesting for me because they're a team that is kind of on the cusp of stuff. They've got, as Michael said, a bunch of UFAs that they want to take care of. I think they're going to get a Jet Grief signed. They have all 7 of their draft picks this season. This summer, they've got a lot of cap space in which to spend some money if they want to go out and try to make a splash, which I believe they probably do. So I think the Blue Jackets are a team that if free agents, and it's not a heavy market, look at that team and go, you know what, there's something there. We like Bonus. We like where they're headed. And if they can retain all those players, we like the direction that they're headed. Maybe they could make some noise next season. I don't know. But I think the Blue Jackets are an interesting case study because they got ahead of the curve. They got the guy they wanted in Bonus. And like Michael said, he might stick around. So it'll be interesting. I don't know that they're going to jump from where they are now to an immediate cup contender anytime soon. But I think this is a team that has a lot of really solid pieces that could make it some noise next season.
Well, Columbus, as I mentioned, out of it this year. Joining them outside of the playoff picture are the Detroit Red Wings, officially eliminated from the playoffs. And now it is time for Buffalo to pass the torch. The Red Wings now hold the longest active playoff drought in NHL history. So their last playoff appearance was in 2016. So 10 years now, the length of that drought. So it comes after the Red Wings made the playoffs for 25 consecutive seasons starting in 1991. So, Mike, where do you think things went wrong for the Red Wings this season? Because for a while there, it was looking like they might finally, have found something and might be turning it around before it sort of fell apart down the stretch.
The worst thing that happened to the Detroit Red Wings was the Olympic break because they came back and they didn't play. Things just dried up. If you look at their roster, I mean, they've got great top-end talent, but they don't have enough talent. You've got DeBrincat, you've got Lucas Raymond, and you got Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin would be a perfect number 2 center on a Stanley Cup winner, but the problem is he's a number 1 center in Detroit. You've got good wingers, like I said, in DeBrincat, an aging Patrick Kane and Raymond. You just don't have enough of them. They don't have a good second-line center behind Larkin. On defense, they have Sider and they have Edmondson, but they have a bunch of veterans after that are just sort of hole pluggers and not really great defensemen. I mean, Yzerman has built up this organization with a lot of young players, but those young players have taken too much time. And I think the patience in Detroit is starting to wear thin. This is the time where probably he's going to have to, trade a couple of these youngsters for a player that helps them make the playoffs now. Otherwise, he's going to be out of a job.
Yeah, it's really this. We talk about this, Jim, the Yzer plan, and this has been something that's supposed to be building up to this point for so long. And, to have it end again with the Red Wings outside of the playoffs. I mean, when you look at this season in particular, what do you think their biggest issue was?
Well, if Yzerman is not let go this summer, then that tells us exactly how impatient or patient the Red Wings are, right? Like, I have a feeling that he's safe. I don't think he's on the hot seat at all. I think ownership and Yzerman are probably on the same page here. And they believe, unlike the fan base in Detroit that is growing impatient, that they have time for what he's doing there. Now, what he's doing there is really kind of confusing. As far as the Yzer plan goes, it's really hard to read into what his plan is. I've heard that he's wanting to take a swing this summer, whether it's a Robert Thomas or an Elias Pettersson, or even if an Austin Matthews were to shake loose out of Toronto. Detroit would be all over that. I don't see that happening. I don't even know if the other two were possible either. But whatever they're doing in Detroit, I think ownership and Yzerman are on the same page here. So they're going to continue to do this thing. As far as what happened this season, I mean, you said it sort of fell apart. It was an epic collapse. It was like one of the worst turnarounds in a negative way that you're going to see in a very long time. And I just believe it was overwhelming. I think they were really solid to start the year. They had unexpected results and production, and they were right at the top of the standings. And I think it just overwhelmed them. And I don't know that they were ready for it. And that led to just some brutal play and losses against opponents that they just couldn't afford to lose to. So I think that's where it all fell apart for them. And it's shocking to me that there's not more talk in Detroit that Yzerman might be in trouble here, but I don't think he is. I think this is one of those things where ownership and the GM are going to figure this out together, and he's got some rope.
Well, just like you said, I think the fans in Detroit probably feel very differently about that, but we'll see what happens this summer. We've talked about the playoff picture in the East, so now let's head over to the West. So the San Jose Sharks beat the Nashville Predators on Monday. In doing so, the they assured that the Anaheim Ducks locked up their first playoff berth since 2018. They also eliminated the Nashville Predators with that win, in addition to LA winning over Seattle. So lots happened in the West, but now we know the Ducks are in. They're third in the Pacific Division. They've got 2 games left, one of them against Nashville. They still could get as high as first over their final 2 games. So that just kind of speaks to where the West is right now. But I mean, Mike, who on the Ducks has impressed you the most this season? Because this is, again, it's been kind of a rebuilding team. And we've talked about with Joel Quenneville coming in, kind of, it looked like that coaching move was sort of a sign that they're ready to take the next step. But if you look on the individual level, or maybe a couple of guys, who do you think has been the most impressive? And then how do you think they fare as contenders in the West?
Well, let's just say Cutter Gauthier and Leo Carlsson really set themselves up for a big payday this summer, because they're both restricted free agents and they're going in on career years. I mean, Gauthier is the most impressive guy so far with 40 goals. I mean, I think they thought he was going to be good, but not this good. And Carlson, who's 19 or 20 years old. I mean, he's very young, but he just seems unfazed when you see him on the ice. He's very cool, calm, and collected, and extremely talented. So, I mean, the top of their lineup, along with Seneca, I mean, they have a group of young forwards that Joel Quenneville is going to try to sort of craft into maybe, Kane and Taves 2.0. That's a tough act to follow, but I think he's going to try to do it. And I think they have the talent. What they do in the playoffs, it all depends on the matchup. They could win first place in the Pacific Division and play, the second wild card, or the first wild card, excuse me. But they could finish third and they could not have home ice advantage. So what they do in their last 2 games is going to be extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, being in Edmonton, you've had a chance to see the Ducks a little bit more, just being in the Pacific Division. So watching this team, who's impressed you the most, and where do you see this team? How do you see this team faring in the playoffs?
Well, I haven't watched the Anaheim Ducks a lot outside of their games against the Oilers, but when they do play the Oilers, they've been a tough matchup every single time. They've given them a run for their money. In games where the Oilers have won or lost those games, it's always been a fun, entertaining style of hockey. It's been fast-paced. That's a good young team. When the question is who's the unexpected player that has surprised me the most, it's probably Beckett Seneca. He has just been a great surprise that I don't think anybody really saw coming. Like Cutter Gauthier, we knew he was going to take a step forward. Leo Carlsson, we knew he was going to take a step forward. Jackson Lacombe, who is not in the Norris Trophy conversation, I think it's a matter of time before he is. He is a fantastic defenseman. But Seneca was one of those guys that you just sort of inserted him in the lineup. You hoped he would produce some stuff, and he's been fantastic. And every time I've seen him, he's been really solid. So I think that was a hugely pleasant surprise for the Ducks. And I think there's a lot that if he does well in the playoffs, and it's going to be brand new for him and most of these guys, this could be a team that does really well. Again, Michael had mentioned just all the seeding is going to figure itself out here over the next few days, and we'll see what those matchups look like. But if the Oilers end up playing the Anaheim Ducks in the first round or second round, it's going to be a tough matchup. Like, I think that's going to be an interesting, fun series, but it's going to be, I think Anaheim could make some noise, but they're a pretty good team. I like Seneca's game, though. He's a really solid rookie.
Yeah, I think the Ducks, they've been kind of a streaky team this year, which you would expect with a young team like that. But really, like you said, if they get hot at the right time, a tough matchup for sure. Like you said, Jim, they're going to be new to the playoffs this year. Not at all new to the playoffs, at least in recent years. They're going to be the Colorado Avalanche. And Brock Nelson actually hit a significant milestone on Monday. He skated in his 1,000th career game for the Avs. He has played 14 seasons in the NHL. 901 of those games were with the New York Islanders, of course, before he headed to Colorado. So on top of winning a gold medal with Team USA this year at 34 years old, Nelson has been great with the Avalanche since he came over. He has 33 goals and 65 points this season. So, Mike, what do you think of Nelson's longevity, how he's found new life with the Avalanche? Because, after reading those numbers and those accolades, it seems strange to say, but I almost feel like he's a little bit underrated in this league.
I agree. And he's like a fine wine. He's just gotten better with age. I mean, if you look at his stats, I mean, 4 of the last 5 seasons, he scored 30 or more goals. I mean, the year that he got traded from the Islanders to Colorado, he only had 26, but that's pretty respectable. And I think anybody who didn't think that he was a good to great player came to that realization based on how he played for Team USA in the Olympics. He was one of the more valuable players playing in a third line role. He can play center, he can play wing. And really, I mean, I think Colorado adding him as a number 2 behind Nathan MacKinnon, you can't sleep on Brock Nelson. He's going to kill you if you ignore him. So it was a good acquisition by Colorado. They paid a high price in Cal Ritchie, but they got a good player. Even at 34 years old, he's very valuable to them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Olympics, and there's a lot of grumbling, I think, about the construction of the U.S. Olympic roster, even heading into that. And did Brock Nelson deserve a spot on that roster? And then very clearly, very quickly, proved that he did. And so, again, with what he did in the Olympics, what he's done with the Avalanche, I mean, Jim, what do you make of his longevity in this league, and what an asset he's been to the Avs since coming to Colorado?
Yeah, I think his Olympic appearance was a surprise to some just because of the 4 nations. He wasn't fantastic there. So when he came into the Olympics and he was on that team and then played really well, that was a nice surprise. As far as his fit in Colorado goes, I mean, is there a better one? You look at a team that knows how to find really good players. Their pro scouting is awesome. And he's fit in seamlessly there. That's a really strong team that just got much, much stronger with him there. Even to the point that they added Nazem Kadri. I was a little surprised when they went out and traded for him because they had Nelson. And it was kind of like, really, you need another center? But they've got so much depth there now. And he's still the second line guy. That's how well he's played, even when Kadri could be a second line center. They're a really solid team, and he just makes them so much better. But yes, as he gets older and he gets more experience, and now in the right environment where he's got really solid pieces and a really deep team around him, it's no wonder he's scoring like he's scoring and producing like he's producing. It'll be interesting to see how long he keeps it up. But I think it's been a really seamless fit there in Colorado.
Yeah, definitely. And we've talked about guys like Brent Burns on the show before, guys that have come into that Avalanche roster and just fit seamlessly even later on in their careers. It's just been kind of a recurring theme there. Again, Avalanche have really been barreling towards the playoffs since the season started, practically. Of course, the Oilers are also going to be headed toward the postseason, but the Oilers recalled Isaac Howard on Sunday as their regular season is winding down. Howard was a standout in the AHL. He had 22 goals, 47 points in 45 games with Bakersfield, but he has just 5 points in 28 games with the Oilers this year. So Jim, I'll go to you first. What do you think of Howard's first professional season as a whole? Because, I mean, do you see him being part of the Oilers playoff roster? Because this was supposed to be a pretty big get for them when he didn't end up signing with Tampa and they were able to have him sign on. So what do you think of his future, at least his immediate future with the Oilers?
I think we're best to judge him by what he's done in the AHL this season. When he was brought into the Oilers, I think at the beginning of the year, they were hoping that he would make this team, stay on this team, and produce in a top 9 role. He wasn't played very much. The minutes that he got from the head coach were limited. He wasn't put in an environment. He was often on the 4th line, and that's not his game. He's a scorer. He's a shooter. He likes to have touches, and he just wasn't getting them on the 4th line, so he went down to the AHL. But he's been really, really good in top line minutes in the AHL. This call-up that just happened right now is about 2 things. One, it's about injuries, and you guys have talked about Leon Draisaitl before, but you've got Max Jones, Jason Dickinson, Zach Hyman, all who are out right now, and their futures are a little uncertain. Hyman should be back for the playoffs. Draisaitl might miss some. Max Jones is out 3 to 4 weeks, and Dickinson is questionable. He's going to be reevaluated at the end of the season. This was also about their LTIR and performance bonuses. When they put Matisse Janmark on LTIR, they could call up Ike Howard now at a cheaper rate, and that's why they sort of did this call-up. But I don't know that he's going to get any playoff time unless the injuries turn out to be worse than they expect. I think Hyman will be ready to go, but Draisaitl spoke the other day and said, this is not an issue I can push. I can't force this. It's a longer-term thing that I have to be careful with. So we know Draisaitl will play through pain, but I don't think he's playing hurt in this situation. I think he'd be playing injured, and those are 2 different things for me. So If he's not able to go and you don't get Dickinson back and you don't get, Max Jones or whomever, maybe Howard sticks around. But outside of that, if this is a healthy roster that they bring most of their pieces back, Howard's not going to be part of the equation. And even if he is, like the other night, when they played last night against Colorado, he played 9 minutes. So it's not like he's going to get a whole lot of ice time. It's a nice story. I think he's going to have a much better season next year. I think they're probably a little disappointed that it didn't turn out that he was a regular producer this season, but I think they still have really high hopes for him. He's been really good in the AHL, and this was more about timing this call-up, probably not about the playoffs, but those injuries make question marks all around the team. It's really hard to know what's going on yet. We won't probably know that for another week.
Yeah, lots of injuries that the Oilers are dealing with, like you mentioned, and injuries to key players as well. And I think it's a good point, Jim, that you bring up the timing. I think maybe the initial hope or thought was that maybe, this could kind of be, if you look at last year, what happened with the St. Louis Blues and Jimmy Snuggerud, and he came in sort of at the end and actually became a key playoff contributor for them in what ended up only being one round, but it was a really good round, really exciting round of the playoffs for the Blues. Sounds like we're probably not going to expect to see something similar from Mike Howard here. But Mike, when you look at Howard and his small sample in his professional career, I mean, are you more inclined to agree with Jim that maybe not this year, but eventually he's going to be a key player for the Oilers?
I think he will. I think that there were teams at the deadline that were interested in trading with Edmonton and probably asked for Isaac Howard, and I'm not sure if they pushed back on it. But I mean, the thing is, I think to maximize his impact and value, he has to play in the top six. And but I don't think they're prepared to put a kid who played 45 games in the American Hockey League and played well, but to put him in against, say, Vegas, because that's a team with laden with veterans and playoff performers, and I just don't think he's ready for that. He's got that offensive ability, but he's not very big, and we know the type of game that is played in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think he needs a little more experience before they expose him to that. I mean, at most, what they do, and this is not maximizing his impact, is him playing on the third or fourth line and then moving players like Roslovic or Savoy or whoever up in the lineup to replace Draisaitl. But if you don't have Draisaitl, I don't know how far the Edmonton Oilers are getting. I mean, they're going to be without him at the beginning. If it gets to a game 6 or a game 7, I think they would have to lock him up and put him in handcuffs to not play. So, but what he will be in terms of a percentage of health, it could be 50%, but he'll want to be out there.
Yeah, lots of questions to be answered here in the final few days of the regular season with the start of the playoffs just right around the corner here. So if you want to read any more about any of the players, teams, playoff matchups that we've talked about here on the show today, head over to the Hockey News. It's been the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start. It's a must-have for any fan. Head to thn.com/free and get in on the action. Grab your subscription today. That is going to do it for today's episode of the Wraparound. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in and listened to us talking some hockey today. We really do appreciate it. We'll be back with an all new episode on Thursday. But for now, for Michael Augello and Jim Parsons, I'm Emma Lingan. This is the Wraparound, and we will see you next time.